Okay, so now I'll talk about my flight specifically. To be honest, I was kind of nervous to fly during this whole pandemic, especially when you see on the news, like for example, a flight attendant could have gotten the virus from one of the passengers, and then that flight attendant who was serving all the other passengers might have spread it to everyone else on the plane. But now Taiwan specifically has done a really good job controlling the spread of the virus. And I know their airlines have implemented a bunch of new measures to ensure the safety of their own cabin crew as well as their passengers. So obviously there's still a risk, and we still need to take precautions to make sure we're doing our part to stay as safe as possible as well. For example, on the flight, it's actually mandatory for everyone to wear a mask at all times throughout the entire duration of the flight. The only exception is for meal times, but actually a lot of passengers opt out of meals because they don't want to take off their mask at all, so they just don't eat or drink for the entire duration of the flight. And also they don't want to drink any liquids because they don't want to have to use the restroom during the flight, which is where cross-contamination could occur because there are other passengers that are sharing the same space. I heard that the flight attendants do disinfect the bathroom very often during the duration of the flight. Anyways, I personally did choose to eat the meals, and I tried my best not to use the restroom, but alas, I had to after each meal, so I used the restroom twice. And everyone's just trying their best to stay as safe as possible, so that really helps. Okay, so speaking of the mask requirement, so that's just the basic requirement for the flight, but actually most people were wearing a lot of other protective gear. For example, I saw things ranging from face shields to shower caps, gloves, goggles. I personally was wearing a shower cap, glasses, mask, and gloves, but obviously the glasses are exposed on the sides and it's not like a goggle where it's completely sealed. And I thought I did pretty good, but everyone else was wearing a face shield and whole hazmat suit and everything. So anyways, I tried my best. I think I might make a separate video on the protective gear for the flight specifically, just because a lot of people were asking me about that and kind of what other people are doing and how comfortable I was being on a plane. So basically, when it's time to check in, I flew EVA Air, and they emailed me 48 hours before the flight with a link to check in online. And in that email, they had all the details of the COVID requirements and the rules and regulations and all the safety measures and everything that you should read over. Everything was bolded in red, so you can't miss it. And also in that email, there's a link to the health declaration form. And I know I keep talking about all these forms and stuff, so again, I think I'm going to make another separate video about all the forms. There are a lot of forms, and sometimes it's hard to figure out when you need what and what you need for each form and what kind of information you need to prepare to provide. So I'll go into more details in a different video. Okay, so once you arrive at the airport, you go to the check-in counter, you check in all your luggage, and then as I mentioned before you get your boarding pass, you have to fill out a survey saying that you feel healthy and everything, and then they take your temperature before they give you your boarding pass. So at the check-in counter, there's actually this pamphlet with a QR code that will take you to the health declaration form. So you just fill that out online, and you can just use your US phone number, and if you have a Taiwan ID, then you just use that. I will go into details in another video. Okay, so even though I have a Taiwan passport, I don't have a Taiwan ID, so they actually told me to fill out this paper form, which in hindsight, because after I landed, they taught me basically how to fill out the online form that I couldn't fill out when I was checking in. So in hindsight, I didn't have to fill out that paper form. Had I known how to fill out the online health declaration form and what information I needed to provide. So I'll go into details about that if you have questions about how to fill it out. So when I did check in, I just filled out the paper form saying that I only had a passport and not an ID, so I couldn't fill out the online form. Just because for the Taiwan passport, there's two different types of Taiwan passports. There's one with household registration and one without. So if you have the one without, then you don't have an ID, which is the one I have. Anyways, so after that, I was able to go through security. The line was super short. They have markers on the ground to make sure everyone social distances while standing in line. And then you go through security, and then I got to my gate, and then that's where I saw everyone who was wearing all their protective gear. And yeah, you just board the plane zone by zone. So as you're boarding, you don't even need your passport or anything, just your boarding pass, because they'll actually scan your boarding pass, and then there's a kiosk that will take a photo of you, and then yeah, you just board the plane. And as I was boarding the plane, I saw that all the flight attendants were wearing full-on gowns, masks, goggles, everything. They were all protected, and of course all the passengers were required to wear masks for the entire duration of the flight as well. Okay, so the plane I was on, the seat configuration is 343. So on my flight, it was one person per section. So I had the middle section, which was a 4, and so I was the only one in the 4, so I could lay down basically. But some people actually say they prefer the 3s on the sides, just because you're kind of like away from the middle aisle, which is where more people are moving, air is flowing. But I wanted the 4 seats so I could lay down, so I chose the middle section. The only people that I saw that had more than one person per section were like a couple that was traveling together. But even then, the middle seat was open and they were sitting on the 2 sides. And I think this is even reflected like online when you're booking your flight, because when I was choosing my seat, like the row was open, but once I chose it, and if I wanted to like change my seat, I could see that only certain seats were available, and it was just like 1 per section. And even that, the 3-seater to my right and the whole row in front of me, the 4-seater, it was completely empty. And the person to my left, there was only 1 person, and then behind me, there was only 1 person. So they did a pretty good job of making sure, you know, everyone is spread out on the plane. And I sat in economy, and so in economy, the armrests go up. So literally it's just like a lie flat bed of 4 seats. And I'm not that tall, so I could fit perfectly fine. I didn't even have to like bend my knees or anything. I just like laid down and it was perfect. So when you board the plane, each seat will have a blanket and a set of headphones. I did notice that they don't provide the pillows anymore, which they used to, probably just to reduce the spread of germs and safety measures. But it was fine because I had 4 seats to myself, which means I had 4 blankets. So I just used 3 blankets and stacked them up as a pillow, and then used 1 blanket as a blanket. And it worked out perfectly for me. Okay, so right when I got on the plane, everybody was disinfecting the seats, the tray tables, the armrests, everything. I did that as well. I brought alcohol wipes, and so I was able to do that as well. But shortly after takeoff, the cabin crew actually comes around and gives everyone a small bottle of water as well as the disinfecting wipe. But by then everyone had already like disinfected their area. But I thought that was a nice gesture in case you forget. So at the beginning of the flight, the first meal is served, and usually they come around with like the meal and then coffee and tea, but to minimize the amount of times that the flight attendants are going up and down the aisles, they just did everything at once. And also there was only 1 choice for the meals. Usually there's 2, there's like Eastern and Western, but there's only 1 option, probably because the reduced number of passengers. So it probably just made more sense just to have 1 option. And so after everyone eats, the lights are dimmed and everyone goes to sleep. Actually slept for a full 8 hours. Well, actually I slept for 5 hours, and then I woke up because I had to go to the bathroom from the liquids I drank during the meal. And that's when I was really contemplating, because I really didn't want to have to use the restroom. But at that point I just had to use the restroom, so I did get up and I just used it as quickly as I possibly could. And then I came back to my seat and I passed out for another 3 hours. So all in all, I got like 8 hours of sleep. And then when I woke up, there was only 2 hours left of the flight, which is when the second and the last meal is served. And at that point, the cabin crew was kind of coming around with like snacks and like a small juice box, probably like prompting everyone that they're about to turn on all the bright lights and to start waking up for the second meal and landing as well. So my whole flight was 12 hours. And the first 2 hours was like getting situated and like the first meal, and then I slept for 8 hours, and then the last 2 hours was the second meal and landing. So for me, the flight flew by super quickly. I didn't even have time to like watch any movies or any TV or anything. I did notice that on the plane, like nobody coughed, nobody sneezed. It was so crazy. Usually on the plane you always hear someone like sneezing or coughing, but like nobody wanted to be suspected of having the virus, so it was literally silent. So overall it was like a really smooth flight. I slept really well because it was quiet and I was able to fully lay down. So yeah, the flight just went by super quickly. Okay, so right before you land, they show like the video of, you know, how to get through customs and immigration and declaration and luggage inspection. And actually, since Taiwan has taken such good care of the COVID pandemic, they're actually already looking forward to like the swine flu. So right after you get off the plane, you actually pick up this card that states that you just arrived from a country that is not at risk for swine flu, and then you just hold on to that until you get to the luggage inspection, and then you just give it to them so you don't have to like go through that. But basically, once you get out of the gate, you're supposed to receive a text with a QR code to the form and all the information you need for the whole like health declaration. But remember, I filled out the paper form when boarding because I didn't have a Taiwan ID, so they told me to fill out the form, but little did I know I still could have filled out the online form. Anyways, they taught me how to do it after I landed. Because I didn't have a Taiwan ID, I did have to fill out the declaration form with my US passport, which kind of freaked me out actually, because I know if you go into Taiwan right now on a visa, you do need to have a negative COVID test, which I didn't have. And I already landed in Taiwan, so that worried me a little bit. But when I asked lady, she was like, it's fine because I do still hold a Taiwan passport, so I just provided that information on the health declaration. So it was fine. I didn't need a negative COVID test. But if you have more questions, I'll go into more detail about that in a different video.